Well, first of all, China today is not Japan yesterday.
You see the images, right? A powerful military on parade, incredible leaps in robotics and tech, a nation that looks like it's firing on all cylinders. But behind all that, there's this nagging question that keeps popping up. Is China just following in Japan's footsteps, heading for its own lost decade? It's a comparison that feels so easy to make, but maybe, just maybe, it's totally wrong.
And that brings us to this bold statement from a lot of economists. They're pushing back hard against the idea that China is just doomed to repeat history. So in this explainer, we're going to dig in and really unpack why they might have a point.
Because, let's be honest, you can see why people are worried. A massive real estate bubble that looks ready to pop, debt levels that are just soaring, an aging population. I mean, the headlines about China today sound almost identical to the ones we saw about Japan back in the early 90s. So, are the experts seeing something we're not? Or is China walking down a very familiar and very treacherous path?
Okay, so first things first. Before we can even compare the two, we have to understand what we're comparing China to. What exactly happened during Japan's infamous lost decades?
Japan's story is just incredible. A story of a jaw-dropping rise and then a sudden grinding halt. You had the post-war miracle that turned it into an absolute economic juggernaut. Then came the 80s, a frenzy of speculation. And then the crash. And this wasn't just some quick recession. We're talking about a multi-decade economic deep freeze that the country is, well, arguably only just starting to thaw from now. If you want to understand how crazy the bubble got, look no further. At its absolute peak, the tiny patch of land under the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was supposedly worth more than all the real estate in the entire state of California. Let that sink in. It was a market that had completely lost touch with reality, and when that fantasy shattered, the whole economy came down with it.
So the bubble bursting was the trigger, but these right here, these are the structural problems that really locked Japan in place for decades. You had an aging, shrinking population, which meant fewer workers and fewer consumers. A strong resistance to immigration meant they couldn't just import new workers. Their corporate culture, once so innovative, got really conservative and stuck in its ways. And maybe the most damaging of all, a deflationary mindset took root. People expected prices to be cheaper tomorrow, so they stopped spending today. And when that happens, an economy just stops.
All right, let's talk about the big one, debt. Both countries have an absolutely staggering amount of it. But here's the key, and it's probably the most misunderstood part of this whole comparison. Not all debt is created equal. The kind of debt they have is fundamentally different. Now, on the surface, this chart tells a pretty straightforward story. Both nations are swimming in debt. Japan's total debt to GDP is a mind-boggling 400%, while China's is hanging around 260%. When you see numbers like that, it's super easy to think, yep, same crisis. But the devil, as always, is in the details.
And this, right here, illustrates the absolute core difference. Japan's debt is mostly public debt. It's the government owing money largely to its own people and its own central bank. The Bank of Japan can manage this. It can buy up the debt. It's basically a closed loop. China's problem is totally different. The debt is mostly corporate. It's companies, including huge state-owned ones, that owe money to banks. And those banks need to make a profit. If the companies can't pay, the banks could fail. And that is how you get a classic, full-blown financial crisis.
Okay, so beyond the debt, there's another crucial difference: where each country was on its economic journey when the trouble started. You could say Japan was already at the finish line, while China is still in the middle of the race. And this might be the single biggest reason their stories are going to turn out differently. To really get China's situation, you have to understand this concept, the middle income trap. It's a classic problem in economics. A country uses manufacturing and investment to pull itself out of poverty really fast, but then it gets stuck. It struggles to make that next big leap to become a truly innovative high-income economy. A lot of countries get trapped here, and it is the #1 challenge China is facing right now. This table just lays it all out perfectly. Back in 1990, Japan had already made it. It was a rich, advanced nation with mature industries. Its crazy growth phase was pretty much over. It had reached the top of the mountain. China today is still a developing middle-income country. It's still climbing. That means its potential for future growth is just fundamentally higher if it can avoid that trap. And this is China's ace in the hole. It's the one thing it has that Japan in 1990 simply didn't have on the same scale. A wildly dynamic, innovative, and entrepreneurial private tech sector. We're talking about companies like Alibaba, Tencent, and thousands of others that are driving real innovation and pushing the whole economy towards services. This isn't just about making things anymore, it's about creating new things. This new economy gives them a powerful engine for growth that is totally separate from all the problems in real estate.
So when we step back and look at the whole picture, the different kinds of debt, the different stages of development, the different engines of growth, it becomes crystal clear. We are not watching a rerun. China's challenges are absolutely massive, for sure, but they are its own unique challenges, not just a ghost of Japan's past.
So let's just boil it all down. 3 key takeaways. Number 1, the debt has different DNA. Japan's is a contained government problem. China's is a riskier corporate problem that could hit the banks. Number 2, they started from completely different places. Japan was already a developed nation. China is still developing, with way more room to grow. And number 3, China has a growth engine, its private tech sector, that gives it an escape hatch from stagnation that Japan just didn't have.
And this really reframes the whole debate, doesn't it? The real challenge for China isn't becoming the next Japan, stuck in a deflationary spiral for decades. The real, and frankly, much harder challenge is whether it can escape that middle-income trap and successfully become a truly advanced high-income nation. That is the test.
So in the end, that comparison to Japan is a useful warning, but it's really a flawed analogy. China isn't destined to repeat history. It's facing its own unique hurdles, and it has its own unique strengths. The real question isn't about its past, but about what path it carves out from here. And that story, well, that story is still being written.